Before you trust a single LSAT Reddit review, I want you to stop, because one wrong thread, one unexamined opinion, one emotionally charged rant from a stranger you will never meet can quietly derail your entire LSAT study plan. It can shift how you see questions, how you interpret difficulty, how you judge prep companies, and worst of all, how you see yourself. And the dangerous part is it feels like research, it feels productive, it feels like doing due diligence, but it's not. So today, I want to talk to you as a mentor who's watched thousands of students succeed and thousands more sabotage themselves in ways they never saw coming. Because I've watched LSAT Reddit review threads wreck people's confidence, their strategy, their mental health, and in some cases, their entire admissions cycle. Now, don't get me wrong, Reddit can be amazing. It can make you feel less alone. It can give you community, solidarity, and emotional relief you don't get from your bookshelf full of LSAT prep books. But it is not a great place to decide whether a question was flawed, whether a prep book is good, whether a course is scammy, whether you're studying the right way, or whether you're behind in the cycle. So today, I want to walk you through how to read LSAT Reddit reviews without losing your sanity, your confidence, or your focus. And by the end of this video, if you take nothing else away, I want you to walk away with a deep, almost unshakable understanding of one core truth. You can't build a 170 plus LSAT score on the emotional debris of strangers. Now, I want to talk about something human, something vulnerable, something I've never really talked about publicly. Back when I was studying for the LSAT, I did what you're doing right now. I read every LSAT prep Reddit thread I could find. I read reviews of courses, reviews of books, reviews of tests, reviews of specific questions. And at the time, I felt like I was getting smarter. But what I was really doing was outsourcing my confidence. Every time I read someone say, this prep test was brutal, or this question is unfair, or this course ruined my score, I took that on as gospel. Reddit became my lens, and that lens warped my reality. And now, 20 years later, after working with thousands of LSAT students, I finally understand why. LSAT Reddit reviews don't measure the truth. They measure stress, they measure insecurity, and how overwhelmed someone felt when they wrote that post. And that realization changed everything for me. Now let's get into the mechanics of why LSAT Reddit reviews are so misleading. The first big factor is beginner bias. Most LSAT reviews are written by people who are scoring in the 140s or 150s. They're stressed, they haven't mastered the fundamentals, they confuse discomfort with poor question design, and they conflate something feeling unfair with being logically valid but confusing. And this is not me criticizing anybody. This is me saying they're writing from the middle of the storm. Let me tell you a quick story. A few months ago, a student in my coaching program messaged me saying, Reddit thinks this question is broken. I think LSAC messed up. And of course, they didn't. LSAC did not mess up. What happened was the question punished a blind spot, and Reddit validated that student's frustration. And the student internalized that validation as fact. That is beginner bias. The second factor is emotional transference. Most LSAT Reddit reviews aren't really reviews. They are emotional outbursts dressed up as analysis. Let's say, for example, somebody has a rough practice test. They go straight to Reddit and they type a 500-word LSAT course review Reddit post in the heat of the moment. And you, who weren't there, you read it and you subconsciously absorb their emotional state. And then your brain is mirroring what they wrote. That is psychology, and it's only too human, but it's not helping you. Because someone who feels lost is not in a position to give you clarity. And the third factor is the validation loop. And this one's a bit more subtle. When a student hits a tough question, there's this quiet, almost invisible shame that appears. They'll think to themselves, I should have gotten that one. And to avoid sitting with that feeling and that discomfort, they go onto Reddit to look for people who also missed that same question. And then suddenly they'll see 12 people saying, this question was weird, this one felt unfair, this one was badly written. And they feel instant relief that it wasn't them and it was the question. But the dark side of that relief is that it destroys your ability to learn from your mistakes. Reddit becomes an anesthetic rather than analysis. Now let's get into the real meat, the recurring patterns that make LSAT Reddit reviews misleading. There are 5 illusions that I see over and over again. The first illusion is a bad question meaning a bad feeling. Students will use bad to describe questions that made them uncomfortable. But your discomfort does not mean the question was bad. Discomfort on the LSAT usually means that you misunderstood something, the argument, the conditional link, you didn't see the flaw, you misinterpreted the scope. And discomfort is a diagnostic. It is a tool to help you improve, but Reddit treats it like a verdict. The second illusion is that if something is hard, it must be unfair. The LSAT is never unfair. It's unflattering, sure. Of course, it exposes your blind spots, it reveals your patterns, it punishes your assumptions, and Reddit takes those moments personally. But the LSAT is not personal. It is remarkably precise. Now, the third big illusion is that people rate resources by their score outcomes, not the quality of their usage. So for example, let's say that somebody uses a prep book and their score doesn't go up. So they immediately write, "This book is terrible." But they never ask, did I use the methods correctly? Did I practice enough? Did I apply the techniques consistently? Did I do the foundational lessons before jumping into drills? People will blame the tool when the real issue is their technique. The fourth illusion is that people don't understand their own learning styles, because Reddit loves best of threads, like what's the best LSAT course, the best LSAT book, the best logical reasoning explanation videos. But that's like asking, what's the best diet? What's the best workout routine? There's no one best. It depends. People want certainty when life is uncertain. Some people need visual frameworks, others need repetition drills, others need structure and accountability. And there's no one best. There's only the best for you. But Reddit collapses that nuance. And the final illusion here is that high scores and low scores are treated as equals. A 175 score saying the flaw is a causal jump carries the same weight on an anonymous form as a 148 score saying this question is weird. Imagine a surgeon saying, here's what's wrong with this surgical technique, and a first-year undergrad saying, yeah, I agree, the scalpel felt awkward. That's how LSAT Reddit works. You don't know who's writing. So let's talk about how to evaluate Reddit threads without destroying your score. First, you want to assess the reviewer's score level. If they're not at or above your target score, filter what they say with a heavy degree of caution and skepticism. This doesn't mean that low scores are wrong. They're just early in the journey. But their reviews tell you more about their current struggle than the quality of the resource. You also want to separate emotional reactions from analytical critiques. If they're emotional and they say, I hated this, this was weird, it felt off, didn't make sense, you probably want to discount it. On the other hand, if they're more analytical and they say, the explanation uses pattern recognition, which didn't fit my learning style, or this teacher's examples moved too quickly for me, or I misunderstood the indicator words, the method didn't fail, I just misapplied it, that's a lot more useful. You want to also ID if the person used the resource properly. And this is huge. If someone skipped lessons, if they drilled without reviewing, if they mixed strategies from multiple companies, if they studied passively instead of actively, or they didn't track mistakes, their review is skewed. And you cannot review a strategy that you did not apply correctly. You also want to check the reviewer's goals, because somebody trying to go from a 147 to a 155 is very different from somebody trying to go from a 165 to a 175. Someone trying to improve in reading comp has different needs than someone struggling in logical reasoning. So if their goals don't fit yours, you want to filter accordingly. And you also want to watch for the validation loop. If the thread feels like everybody here is also angry about this question also, you want to be careful, because that is not a true consensus. That's just people sharing their anxiety. Now, discussions of individual questions are dangerous because people often are missing subtle logic. They confidently explain things incorrectly. They argue based on non-LSAT reasoning, and they defend their wrong answers emotionally. So you want to look for structure-based explanations, not linguistic ones. A bad explanation would say, this answer felt more right, or this wording seemed clearer. A good explanation is specific. It says, this commits a part-to-whole fallacy, or this conclusion overextends the premise, or the correct answer preserves the conditional chain. You also want to avoid threads debating fairness, because 99% of supposedly unfair questions are perfectly normal. So if the thread says, this one feels ambiguous, this one's worded strangely, or LSAC messed up, you want to skip that one because that is emotional transference. You also want to trust high scorers over group sentiment. If a 172 score gives a clear breakdown and 20 people with low scores disagree, you want to trust the high scorers. Now, I want to give you my exact playbook for evaluating resources like books, courses, methods, tutors, without outsourcing your judgment to random strangers. First, you want to evaluate based on actual LSAT logic. You want to use resources that help you break things down, teach you standard flaws, teach you conditional logic, teach you structure, and teach you techniques rather than cheap tricks. If a resource does that consistently, it's a good resource. You also want to give it time, ideally at least 10, 15 hours of work with the resource before you evaluate it. If you've only done 2 lessons, 2 chapters, 1 practice section, 1 bad day, it's not enough of a sample to make a fair evaluation. Most LSAT progress is nonlinear. You got to give it time. You also want to make sure the resource is updated for the current LSAT because, of course, the LSAT has changed. Logic games are off the test. Reading comp is evolving. Logical reasoning is the majority of the test. Make sure the resource reflects that. Old reviews from a couple of years back are outdated. You also want to use a 3-question litmus test. Does the resource make you faster? Does it make you more accurate? And does it make you more confident? If it does 2 out of the 3, keep it. But if it doesn't do any of them, of course, skip it and move on. Now, none of this is really about test strategy. It's about emotional regulation. When you're studying for the LSAT, you're not just solving problems. You are constantly managing your feelings, anxiety, doubt, confusion, comparison, and insecurity. Reddit gives you immediate relief, but that relief is expensive. A student once told me, Steve, I saw a thread saying the LSAT is getting harder, and it ruined my entire week. Not because the test changed, but because their perception of the test changed. And that perception influenced their confidence, confidence influenced performance, performance influenced emotion, and emotion influenced Reddit usage. And the cycle repeats. That is the emotional validation loop, and it is the silent killer of LSAT progress, and so you've got to break that loop. So to bring this full circle, Reddit is a great place for community, encouragement, feeling less alone, and celebrating victories, but it's not the place to build your study plan, your technique, your confidence, your interpretation of LSAT difficulty, or your beliefs about prep books or courses. After all, you are aiming for law school, right? You're training to be a thinker, a reasoner, a person who can filter information, weigh it, analyze it, and choose wisely. You cannot do that if you outsource your judgment to the loudest voices on LSAT Reddit. So I want you to reclaim your judgment, trust your mind, and build your score from a place of clarity, not chaos. And treat LSAT Reddit reviews the same way you treat LSAT answer choices. You're skeptical, you're questioning everything, looking for structure, filtering out emotion, finding what is logically supported, and ignoring what is not. Do that, and you will grow faster, score higher, and stay far more grounded. You deserve that, and you've worked too hard not to succeed, and you're too smart to let strangers steer the wheel.